Welcome to Wireside Chats. I'm Neil Terracciano, your host, and welcome to this, our second episode of 4 on the topic of converged infrastructure. In our first episode, we had a high-level discussion with two of Ology's esteemed engineers, our Director of Technical Services, Dan Patrick, and also one of our Senior Solutions Architects, Kevin Reynolds. So what is CI? So in that first episode, we covered loosely some of the definitions that help us sort of understand the value or what the term is meant to impress upon the IT world. And it's essentially the unification of all things compute, storage, and networking. It's sort of purpose of it is to unify all these things into a single fabric that is easy to scale and much easier to maintain and grow. And more importantly, it helps us maximize the efficiency of your IT budget by making sure that utilization is as high as possible. One of the major benefits of virtualization. So we're very excited today because we have Damien Bowersock, the Senior Solutions Architect from SimpliVity. Damien, thank you very much for making it here today. Could you tell us a little bit about what you do for SimpliVity?
Absolutely, Neil. Thank you very much for having me today. We at SimpliVity are very pleased to be here with you on the Wireside Chat. I am a solutions architect for SimpliVity. I've been here for quite a while, actually, in SimpliVity terms, in eternity. One of the first couple of solutions architects that joined the company. So I focus on pre-sales. We also do implementations as solutions architects. And my coverage is basically the Midwest. So.
Okay. So when you say pretty senior in terms of SimpliVity, how old is SimpliVity? How long have you guys been around?
Great, good question. So SimpliVity was founded in 2009, so about 4.5 years we've been in business now. We spent the first 3.5 years basically with our heads down developing this product and getting it ready to bring to market. 42 months to be exact of development time before we GA'd the product. It's almost unheard of in the industry to get that long of a runway.
Yeah, also unheard of to be so disruptive in such a short period of time. You know, I imagine that there are some people in our audience that haven't heard of SimpliVity, but those numbers are becoming fewer and fewer every day, and I think that that's a really good sign for some of the things that SimpliVity is doing. And before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of this, you know, convergence is sort of a loosely defined term in the IT space. It's sort of elusive, like cloud, right? I mean, cloud was something we could spend hours attempting to define. It always seems to escape the grasp. So let me ask you this, because it's probably you could be a little more specific. How does SimpliVity define convergence or converged infrastructure?
That's a fantastic question, and something that we probably define a little bit differently than most of the other people in the industry. We define converged infrastructure in 3 different categories. The first is what we would call Convergence 1.0. The companies that came before us that took commodity infrastructure products, pre-integrated them into a chassis, maybe gave you some common management infrastructure, something along those lines, and wrapped a product name and a product SKU around it. Convergence 2.0, or the second phase, is where companies stepped in, took compute and storage and integrated them into a scale-out kind of architecture. And where we play is what we like to call Convergence 3.0, which is really the integration of not only the compute and the storage, but also delivering the rest of the customer's infrastructure. Products like backup targets, deduplicated backup targets, cloud gateways, WAN optimization, those individual components integrated into the stack as well. So for us, it's not enough to just be converged. We want to be, to use the overused term now, hyper-converged, but really it's the idea of bringing that entire stack of infrastructure into the environment.
Well, it's not overused like cloud yet, so I think we have...
No, we're not there yet.
Right, we have a ways to go, right? I do feel like there's a real value here that's much more measurable. I mean, you try measuring the cloud. I mean, it's definitely something that I feel like a lot of IT directors or even solutions architects are finding as sort of refreshing, right? I mean, one of the biggest things or challenges that we'll have for a big organization is sprawl, and that's really what your product does, is it helps reduce the cost with that, which again is elusive, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So it's extremely expensive to manage all of those individual components, both from an acquisition cost, the actual capital outlay to buy those products, as well as the ongoing maintenance contracts and dealing with the overhead of managing those different devices. You know, consider for the fact that in a big shop, you have a group of people that are dedicated to managing the compute side. They're all certified and experts in VMware. Then you have a different camp of people that are all storage guys, and they're all certified and experts in their storage platform. And when those two have to come together and work together, it's not always a seamless operation. So we really strive to break down those walls. In some organizations, that's a challenge, but it saves the company money in the long term to be able to have a unified platform.
And that's a very interesting thing, right? Sort of the siloed approach. The silo is another term that we hear a lot in the IT world. Those cost money. We build whole business units sometimes around each of those silos. You may have storage specialists and then server specialists. Network specialists, and SimpliVity sort of endeavors to reduce the cost associated with that, right? So one of those things, the SAN silo itself, which you just mentioned yourself, is one that is becoming more and more expensive. Now, I don't think any of us would say that SANs are going away forever, but I can foresee that in a lot of businesses, this might be an opportunity to reduce some of the costs, convert some of those SAN specialists back towards a higher level architect role, and play a role where they can face the business unit and provide a lot more value and drive profitability, instead of hammering into a command line interface on an EMC and taking off for 3 weeks for classes so that we can learn how to bolt on more storage, right?
You're absolutely right. The whole purpose is to simplify the environment, and despite all of our attempts at waving the flag and saying that tape is dead, we haven't gotten rid of tape in the infrastructure completely. So I doubt that SANs are going anywhere either. So
right. Unfortunately, there's a lot of us that are tired of sneaker netting tapes off-site, but I just don't see it either. It's not going anywhere. Right. So it takes us to another piece. You're not the only converged infrastructure solution out there. There's a lot of ways to skin the cat. Mm-hmm. I certainly am convinced that SimpliVity has some very unique values that sort of separate you from the rest. Why don't you take this opportunity to sort of shed some light on that? How's SimpliVity different than your typical converged solution?
Right. If we took a high-level look at it and just said, okay, are you storing virtual machines in a hyper-converged state? In other words, do we have a single platform that delivers compute and storage in the same box? Then we all start to look alike. But the difference is how we get those virtual machines to disk. And for SimpliVity, it comes down to dedupe compression and optimization. 3 pieces of technology that are, in our world, very integrated and extraordinarily important to solving a problem that nobody has really addressed in this space at all, and very few people even address it from a storage standpoint. And that problem is the data efficiency model. We talk about data efficiency in what I call ancillary products or extra ecosystem products that get added to the environment later. But we don't really address the data efficiency problem in core infrastructure. In other words, what we do is we take every block of data and we look at it and we write it out to disk. And in traditional storage, we make 2 assumptions. We assume that the block of data is unique and that it's important. And while the latter of that may absolutely be true, the block is important, the former of that is not necessarily true. Not every block of data is unique. And that's where the deduplication comes in. So for SimpliVity, we decided that it is integral to providing a high-performance solution to do inline deduplication. In other words, when the data is actually created, analyze the block, determine whether or not it's unique data. If it is unique data, write it to disk. If not, update the metadata and move on.
So, if I may, I mean, I heard something about WAN optimization. Do you have anything to add on that? Because that's very interesting to me. You guys have something internal to your machine that does WAN optimization?
So we do, in the sense that the biggest reason that we look to acquire WAN optimization is bulk data transfer. Right, so if I'm replicating data from one site to the other, and I'm talking about it, virtual machines especially, we're talking about gigabytes and terabytes of data that has to traverse the network. So a lot of times we look at companies like Riverbed and Silver Peak, et cetera, to really reduce the amount of data that traverses the network multiple times. And again, that's because we haven't addressed that data efficiency model at the time of data creation. We're doing it at some point in the future, which is fine, but it's not good enough in our world. So we address that problem at the time of creation. The data is, at that point then, pre-optimized for the WAN, because now when I transfer data from one data center to the other, no longer do I have to send the entire data set. I only send the unique blocks that don't already exist at the remote site. So in other words, we take that redundancy out of the data path, both writing data to disk as well as making it go across the network. So we're already WAN optimized from day one.
So you're sort of you're compounding, right, some of the basic features that one would expect from WAN optimization with the effects of deduplication. So it sounds like you're using deduplication that's more as a major part of your disk performance then, right? This isn't just for the DP piece, right? Are you using deduplication all the time? Is it an always-on feature for SimpliVity?
Deduplication is absolutely an always-on feature. And if you have the ability to do it and maintain high performance, why wouldn't it be?
So that's an interesting one, okay? Because you just said something has been a challenge. Those of us that have ever been into any of the SANs out there, whether it's EMC or NetApp, there is a deduplication feature that's available, whether you have to pay extra for it or not. You're paying for a checkbox, essentially. I'm sure there's some people in the audience that have checked the box and watched that SAN's performance fall down. So how are you guys overcoming that? If you're going to use deduplication on a machine that I'm relying on for my compute, how am I making sure that the overhead is in bringing it to its knees?
Yeah, it's a very fundamental design principle for us, and that is something that we learned basically by looking at the companies that came before us. And in this space, we stand on the shoulder of the giants of Data Domain and Diligent and other companies that have tried to do deduplication for primary storage before us. And so one of the key things is we realized early on that dedupe is extremely expensive, compression is extremely expensive in terms of CPU cycles. And while you can implement all of those things in software, in order to do that effectively and in order to guarantee performance, you have to rob resources from another place in the infrastructure to deliver that functionality. So what we did is we said, well, this is great, we could do it in software, and CPUs are fast and all of those things, but instead of taking away from our operating systems and our applications, let's offload that off of the CPU and put it onto an accelerator card. Now, the problem is we couldn't go out to the open market and just pick up a dedupe accelerator card. It didn't exist. So that's a significant portion of the intellectual property is that we have developed an offload engine for dedupe and compression, and then also for optimization. We talk a lot about optimization. It's not just a buzzword for us. It actually is a set of technologies, and that's because we're focused on storing virtual machines. So we built this card. It's a PCI card. It goes in each one of our platforms, and it takes all of that heavy lift, all the algorithms, the computations for dedupe and compression, pulls them off of the CPU and puts them onto that PCI card.
So that's very unique, right? We're not utilizing some of the monetized resources, right? Because this is sort of the direction we've gone. We've started monetizing our compute down to the thread or the core and down to a gig of RAM. I mean, we're seeing some provisioning requests where, save me the details. I just need, I need a gigahertz of clock, and I need 1 gig of RAM and 60 gigs of space.
Yep.
And there's a monetary value associated with that. And what you're telling me is SimpliVity said, take us out of that economy. We'll provide that that value to the infrastructure, and you can maintain 100% of that core count and that RAM availability for your provisioning requirements.
You're absolutely right. It would have been very easy for us to kind of belittle it to the point to say, well, CPUs are cheap, right? I mean, the speed of cores go up every year. It's Moore's law. We can take that functionality and we can just ride on top of it. But for a customer, that's not necessarily the equation. I mean, you're managing down to the clock cycle and the core count to determine exactly how much capacity you need in an environment. And if a company like us comes in and says, hey, well, we're just going to steal, X percentage of that to deliver this functionality, then that undermines the value in what we're trying to deliver. So that's where that accelerator card really comes into play. And we see this in other places in the industry as well, right? We have offload engines from Teradici to deliver PC over IP because the same principle applies from VDI. What quantity of desktop sessions do I lose by doing PC over IP and software as opposed to putting it onto an Apex card? Same thing goes for the iSCSI stack. We often implement tow cards for iSCSI, especially in VMware environments, because again, we're stealing those resources just to encapsulate a packet.
Yeah, and that's a great point, right? I mean, we're just trying to sort of remove some of the utility, the highway maintenance, so to speak, so that the cars can run freely and the maintenance trucks don't get in the way, right? I think that's really amazing. So I'm hearing deduplication, which is very unique because it's inline, so there's no overhead with that. So it's offloaded to a PCI card, which I think is amazing. I think that's really unique. I don't think that there's anybody doing that, at least that I'm aware of. The WAN optimization piece, which is sort of compounding that, and that's very exciting. Can you tell me a little bit about the disk architecture? Because I'm sure some of us are wondering, what's the overall disk I/O look like on one of these? And you don't have to get too specific, because I know it sort of comes with an asterisk. But is there any optimization there as far as the disk performance goes? Are we maximizing some of the cost per gig on some disk structures architectures and utilizing maybe even SSDs in your solution? I think you guys are, but maybe you could explain that.
Sure. Each one of our platforms comes with a combination of spinning drives and SSD. And so the spinning drives are used as the capacity storage, and the SSDs are primarily used as cache. From a performance standpoint, from an I/O standpoint, it's going to vary widely based on your read-write mix in a particular environment. But some of our boxes can do 20, 30,000 I/Os a second on a single box, and then it's linear scaling. So each time I add another one, I can get that increment of capacity over and over and over. And there's actually a really good white paper on our website from ESG that kind of validates the sizing model and the scaling model. We built a solution with 40 systems in a single data center, scaled it out to about 1.2 million I/Os. So that actually ran a little over 30,000 I/Os per box. So. Yeah,
linear scale's really a godsend for those of us that are trying to design future-proof infrastructures, right? It's not very hard for us to figure out, what the path looks like if we need capacity and/or performance increases from a storage perspective when we have a SimpliVity solution.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have 3 interdependent silos that can bottleneck each other in your typical let's say monolithic scenario, then each one is sort of creating a bottleneck in the other one. So it's really, and excuse me for the simplifying you guys down to Lego blocks, it's really just bolting on more capacity and performance as the company needs it. So the architect, rest assured, doesn't have to worry about whether or not they're going to have to invest in a SAN or some compute, right?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. I mean, I don't want to date myself, but I've been doing this a fairly long time, and I'm still looking for that sizing crystal ball that's accurate to 3 to 5 years, which is what a customer wants to buy for. Yet they can only tell me what they've grown, what they need today. So,
well, that's a good point, right? There isn't one, but
no,
maybe
absolutely there isn't.
Maybe somebody could come up with a product that will just answer to the problems that the lack of crystal ball presents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll just keep bolting on this linear scale. So that's very exciting, and it should bring a great deal of relief to a lot of those people out there. So we're talking about planning and thinking about how one might take advantage of linear scale.
Yep.
OmniCube, just the moniker itself, sort of seems to give a hint of simplicity, right? And you guys do have several different products, several different sizes. I'm not going to ask you into details of those, but I'm sure that there are going to be some IT folks out there that sort of have a yeah right factor, right? Believe it when I see it. It's just one box, sort of Fisher Price IT box that I can plug in, Ron Popeil, set it and forget it, right? So, but there's still got to be some wisdom in this, right? I mean, we still need to plan. Considering your tenure at SimpliVity, I'm sure you have seen a few of these integrated into some environments, and you've seen them eased in, or maybe even some big bang projects where they just totally rip and replace. I think what we'd be most interested in, in your tenure at SimpliVity, are there any words of wisdom when it comes to best practices or design practices when it comes to considering your solution?
Absolutely. So, of all the deployments that I've seen so far, I don't know that we have any that have been 100% rip and replace. Probably have a couple that are greenfield environments where the customer didn't have virtualization prior to SimpliVity coming in. But for the most part, we stand up our solution in parallel with their existing virtualization environment, and we have the ability to share our storage out to existing ESX hosts, so that customers can kind of seamlessly migrate their virtual machines in at the pace that they want to. So there's no pressure to, at day one, wholesale change the environment to SimpliVity. We can go as fast as they want to, or we can go as slow as they want to. But as far as words of wisdom goes, it's be prepared to be overwhelmed with simplicity, because it's a couple hours deployment. To get a box out, rack, stacked, powered on, configured, and up and running. And usually by midday, we have the customer migrating virtual machines into the environment already. So it's usually a pretty good lunch by that point.
So I heard you just say something about easing it into the environment. So the boxes can present outside of themselves? What is it, NFS or? So there's a way for us to ease this into an environment if we have maybe a slight storage need. Maybe could you go down that path with me, because I think that's very interesting. I mean, this gives an opportunity for someone to ease into SimpliVity and test it out, which is a little less scary for some of us, right? We may be a little conservative.
Sure.
So, like you said, big bang projects, they don't happen a whole lot. Greenfields, yes, sure, there's a little less risk there, right? Because something wasn't working usually already for us to break. That path is interesting to me. It's very compelling. So if I have a small storage need or a medium storage need, is this an opportunity for someone to evaluate SimpliVity if they're looking at virtualizing, in the next 12, 18, or even 24 months?
Absolutely. One of the easiest paths to SimpliVity is via storage refresh projects. So companies that have aging infrastructure, whether it be, a 5-year-old EqualLogic or a 4-year-old Compellent or something like that, that they're looking to replace with next generation technology, we fit nicely into those kind of discussions. So, and again, it doesn't have to be painful. It doesn't have to be, buy 6 SimpliVity boxes, put them in day one, and throw everything else away.
Yeah, that's a lot easier to digest, right? I mean,
absolutely. It would be pretty arrogant of us to come in and say day one, hey, you got to get rid of all that other stuff.
It's scary. Simple is scary, right? I mean, people associate that with risk, right? Don't worry, cruise control, take a nap, don't worry. I mean, that's something when someone says, don't worry about it, we'll put this one little 2U box in there, it'll replace I don't know how many pizza box servers. and then you can just sort of walk away from it. And I think I think it's a good opportunity for some use case. Hopefully you were prepared to give us a few. I know I saw a few on the website when I did a little research on you guys before I had you on. Could you maybe give us sort of some examples of SimpliVity, maybe some value or some implementation process? I think one of the best ways to get to know a product is through application. So, you know, if I'm not surprising you with this, you have any use cases that come to mind that you'd be willing to share with us?
Absolutely. So a couple of use cases we could talk about, and these are use cases that are available on the website. We have probably 12 to 15 documented use cases, customer case studies on the website. They're readily available for download. But one of the ones that I like to talk about is a customer of mine in Colorado. They are a design build architecture construction firm, and they have a sister company in Denver. The design build company is in Fort Collins. The sister company is in Denver. That's a property management firm. They were looking for, again, a replacement of aging infrastructure, wanted to be able to deliver their virtualization environment in a simpler way. They're a small IT shop. They have a couple of guys that run the infrastructure. And so they looked at us, they looked at a couple other companies, and what George says, and it's actually one of the taglines right at the top of the case study, he said, I found 3 solutions in one. I found a compute solution, I found a storage solution, and I found what I needed from a data protection standpoint. And the reason we were able to deliver that is we gave him in 4U in Fort Collins and 4U in Denver the ability to have all of his virtual machines running, the capacity that he needed, and then also the ability to have point-in-time backup and recovery of his virtual machines in both data centers. So he can replicate his VMs from Fort Collins down to Denver and Denver back up to Fort Collins, vice versa. So again, they're sister companies, so they want to have reciprocal DR. So he has the ability to do that native to the platform. It's all managed under a single management interface, which happens to be pre-integrated right into the vSphere client. And it's easy. It was, again, got the boxes, delivered. I showed up on a Wednesday morning or whatever it was, and by midday we were up and running and moving data back and forth. So it's a very simple, very easy implementation, but the amount of functionality that delivers is immense. Looking at old virtualization projects prior to this, these were 2, 3 week, 4 week engagements to deliver the same amount of solution set in a customer's environment.
So a couple things, right? How long was it to implement?
So we had a couple of minor issues with his vCenter server, had to rebuild. I'm sure you've heard of single sign-on issues with vCenter 5.1.
No.
So we had a couple of little issues with that, but other than that, I mean, the SimpliVity boxes were up and running in just under 4 hours.
So 4 hours versus 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you think?
So let's talk about that. How long does it take you to implement server compute for VMware, storage for VMware? Okay, so I'm implementing, let's say, 2 or 3 ESX hosts. I'm implementing a brand new SAN. I'm also implementing a WAN optimization platform, and I'm also implementing new backup software, new replication software.
Well, how many employees do I have?
2. two infrastructure guys. 2 guys dedicated to infrastructure.
They're pretty expensive since they know EMC and HP and all these other players, right? So that's a great point. So, yeah, I imagine that would take weeks after maybe. I don't even think we could draw the Visio diagram in 4 hours.
Well, and the other side of it is, yeah, individually we could probably implement a lot of those solutions in a fairly short period of time. The difficult part is making them all work together.
Right.
Right?
Because then the network guy has to come in and mess that all up, right?
Well, yeah. No, well, that's not to say the network guy doesn't come in and mess it up with us too, but the devil is in the details of integration. The devil is making that science project come together seamlessly, and all of that functionality is pre-delivered. It's cookie cutter at that point. For us, it's built in.
Well, that's very, very compelling. So this is a use case that hopefully we can find on your website, and you know what, I'll make sure that our marketing group grabs a copy of that so that we can hang it up on our sites and share it with some of our customers. I find a lot of your points incredibly compelling. So folks, you know, to recap on some of the values that we're sort of uncovering with SimpliVity that I find, frankly, a little bit is surprising. Some of it I thought I had covered most of it in my prior research, but the deduplication is something that I think that we're going to see more and more in our environments, and I think that SimpliVity is way ahead of the curve, obviously, especially with you guys offloading it so that we can continue to keep our applications sort of separated, right, not affected from the same environment, you know, that we're using just to run the environment, right? We're separating that, and that's sort of important when it comes to designing an infrastructure. Those are the ghosts in the machine that are very difficult for us to measure and for us to sort of ascertain sizing. Just sizing alone is a challenge. When I want to introduce things like virtualized WAN optimization or virtualized deduplication, without a POC on an environment that's considerably smaller than the production environment, there's a risk associated, and we've all accepted that risk when we build these environments. We have secondary and tertiary plans for those, but when you're able to find a technology like SimpliVity that has separated the deduplication and taken that all, you know, inline but offline, so that you can appropriately calculate the needs for your mission critical applications, that's compelling. Secondly, when you're able to integrate it into your environment as just a storage solution, for instance, or I imagine that it could be just a compute solution, although I'm not sure that that's the best way to utilize it, or you know, consider any of the other possible uses that you could find to ease it into your environment and become comfortable. Some cautionary, right? Some cautionary sort of flags here. One is, it sounds like you need to know something about VMware. So you might want to sort of brush up, maybe modernize your certifications to get a VCP. But folks, I'm going to tell you, if you don't have one, you should probably go get one. That's a pretty important one. The future is in virtualization, and VMware is a big market share on that one. So I view that as a strength. Go down the path of what's there. So so Damien, is there anything else you might want to add to that? I mean, I've learned a lot from this. I really find it interesting. Any points you want to add to the values of SimpliVity?
I think you've covered a lot of them, and I certainly appreciate the summary. For us, it's all about one humble mission, and you'll hear it from our CEO all the way down to those of us in the field, and even down to the engineers back at corporate developing the product. Our humble mission is to simplify IT infrastructure. It's a big goal, it's a lofty goal, but we feel like we can deliver it, and we are delivering it today. So that.
I'm hearing that, right? So, if I may, Damien, let me move to the next piece, right? We have two things. We always ask at the end as sort of a futurology question, but it does look like we had one or two questions from the audience. This is a great one. What version of VMware ESX does OmniCube support? I think that's a great question. So, are you guys caught all the way up like nobody else is, or where do we kind of draw the line?
So we currently support 5.1 and 5.5.
Okay, so 5.5 is proven on your platform.
Yep.
Okay, well that's great. So until 5.6 or 6.0 or
whatever they call it next.
Right.
Right.
So we're pretty much covered there.
Yep.
Another one, network connectivity options. That's a good one.
Oh, great question. Each of the boxes comes standard with two 1 gig interfaces, two 10 gig interfaces. We typically use the 1 gig interfaces for the management network and the 10 gig for the storage traffic, and then we also have a network that we call Federation, which is the communication between the OmniCubes. That rides on the 10 gig network as well.
Okay.
We can also add additional NICs into the platform if the customer needs it. So,
To what level? How dense can we get with the ports on an
let's
OmniCube?
see. So we could do a total of 6 10-gig interfaces or a total of 6 1-gig interfaces. So you can add 2 NICs, dual ported each, 1 gig or 10 gig.
That's great. Okay, so if you need more than 60 gigs, right? I mean, you said 6 10 gig.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we run into that ratio problem, right? There's probably not enough cores on a box to demand more than 60 gigs of traffic.
The other thing to remember is that, because the storage is local, now we've kind of changed the paradigm for connectivity out. A lot of times the reason we build large-scale network capacity into an ESX host is to get to the storage. And if the storage is local and we're writing to it quickly, the amount of bandwidth that's required to get out to that storage goes down.
That's the shift from north-south to east-west, right?
That's exactly right.
Right, and that's a great point. If we were able to sort of eliminate the storage traffic off of our networks, some of our network vendors wouldn't be very happy, would they? So.
You say they would be happy or they wouldn't?
No, I don't think they'd be very happy, right? I mean,
I think you're probably right there.
Right, traffic is your friend. I mean, that takes us to another one. With any solution, whether it's SimpliVity or any other converged solution that Vology offers, one of the benefits. There's a lot of secondary benefits that arrive. One of them is port costs, right? I mean, you start reducing port costs and reducing rack space that's taken. And I might add to that, right? In your use case, I'd imagine that it was probably a little cheaper to power your OmniCubes than all the pizza boxes that they had. I think you said it was a rack or a rack and a half of servers that were powered, let alone all the networking needs right there too, right? I mean, there's some TCO value that's quite measurable, isn't there?
It's about 3x. So whatever that math works out to be.
It's a third of the cost, or
it's about a third of the cost.
From a power, is this the whole thing? Power and port costs
from a TCO perspective. So roll up the cost of acquisition, maintenance, ping power and pipe, all of those things rolled into one bundle. If you roll all that up and compare us to the stack of equipment that we replace, it's about a 3x reduction, or a third of the cost.
That's pretty impressive. That's pretty aggressive, Damien. I think there's a few CFOs that would like to see the numbers on that one, and hopefully we get an opportunity to do that, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So let's say the last segment. It's one of my favorite parts. It's sort of the futurology piece, right? So I want you to be comfortable with going anywhere, right? You could do anything in quantum mechanics, or you can stay local to us and tell us maybe a secret about SimpliVity. I guess it wouldn't be a secret anymore at that point. So, so what's the future hold in your eyes? I mean, and you could go anywhere. High level future of IT, or maybe the future for SimpliVity. Do you have anything to tease us with?
So I'm not really authorized to give you big details, but there is a large vendor conference coming in about 3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks, that you'll see some significant announcements from us at that show. So, of course, I'm talking about VMworld. Hopefully, we'll see you out there. If not,
hopefully I get out there.
But
you'll be busy.
Yeah, that we will be, I'm sure. But we'll be there. We'll be giving a car away again, like we've done for the last 2 years. So there will be some large announcements from us in that regard, and things that you could probably expect to see. I mean, our platforms are ever evolving. So 2 years ago, when we started shipping product, or we started really talking about the product, we really had one platform. It was 12 cores. It came with 256 gigs of RAM and about 20 terabytes of storage. That was it. Since then, we've moved to 3 different platforms that have different performance and capacities. It's a pretty safe assumption that we're going to continue to move that platform discussion forward. Go ahead.
Well, that's exciting. So those of you that are thinking about whether or not you'd like to attend that conference for VMware, I would suggest you make it out there. The statements I made about how important VMware should be All due respect to any other hypervisor platform out there, I'm just as big a fan, but at the same time, I think that it's very difficult to ignore the gorilla that's in the room, and VMware's doing a lot of things that are very positive. And I think it's great that SimpliVity is sort of centering themselves around a platform that probably has the most mind share, in the marketplace. So make sure you at least check that out. Reach out to your Vology account executive here, either at the Tampa location or in our new West Coast location in Irvine, California, and ask some questions about SimpliVity, and ask us about some of the customers that we've been able to help out in the past to see if there's a possibility for us to give you guys any real savings. If you have any additional questions on the topic, folks, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us just through our website, or even post some questions up on any of the social media places that you can find information on Wireside Chats. So, folks, I really appreciate you tuning in. Damien, thanks so much for joining us. It's been very, very exciting. I've heard some really compelling things. I'm excited for you. It sounds like you're going to be very busy. We may not be able to get you on the phone for the next few weeks, so I'm glad we were able to get you now, because it sounds like things are going to get busy for you later.
It certainly are, and thank you, Neil, for having us. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk about SimpliVity and Vology and the unique offering that we have together.
That's great. Folks, make sure you pay attention to Google+. Feel free to watch this at any other time on YouTube later. We hang these up on a regular basis. So coming soon, part 3 out of 4 on convergence. We're going to wait a little while to tell you who the vendor is that's going to be for that, and also on the date for when that event's going to happen. But until then, folks, I'll see you on the wire side.